This session, our last session, is managing a multi-generational workforce. Really interesting topic. And our speaker today is Leslie Gilmartin. Leslie is an executive at Badenoch and Clark. Today's workforce is more complex than ever. I'm not sure if that's an insult. Today's workforce is more complex than ever before, I should say, with leaders being in a unique position of managing teams of up to 4 or more generations, with employees ranging from 18 to 80 years old. This has significant implications for employers when considering how to attract, how to retain, and how to manage employees of widely different ages who are likely to have different priorities, different skills, and absolutely different preferences. So Leslie will share with us a wealth of experience and knowledge in leading today's multi-generational workforce. And a number of you will be familiar with Leslie and her many posts throughout lockdown 1 and 2 on social media on her pearls of wisdom on leadership. Leslie, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Stephen. It's pearls of wisdom and pearls before swine, or whatever other metaphors we can think of. And please, I think I've been on some of the sessions earlier today, and I really just want everybody to join in on this, because it's the last session of the day. I'm sure you're all teamed out. So please do questions, shout, holler, put them on chat, whatever. And I think actually Stephen said earlier, I wrote it down, make some noise, because it is the last one of the day. So hopefully if I can share my screen. Just don't look at my desktop, because I've had a row for that already. Can someone give me a thumbs up or a shout out that you can see that all right?
That's fine, Leslie.
Great, thanks very much. Thanks, Stephen. So absolutely delighted to be part of this 3-day extravaganza with the Scotland Excel Academy, and we've been working with Scotland Excel for a number of years now, so I feel part of the Scotland Excel family. And some of you may know Badenoch and Clark as a recruitment and executive search firm, but we also do leadership consultancy and management consultancy, and obviously what I'm going to talk about this afternoon is part of that. So thinking about this topic about multi-generational workforce and thinking about the research that we did about 3 years ago, and I'm more than happy to share some of that with you today, but obviously any research that was done before last March has kind of, the focus has changed slightly. So I really just want to highlight, first of all, what is this whole thing about managing a multi-generational workforce? And Stephen has alluded to some of that already, in the fact that we've got agile working, we've got flexible working, we've got hybrid working, and I completely agree with Nicola, who spoke before, about the fact that those 3 things are 3 different things. Let's not confuse them. You may find yourself as a leader leading a team of 4 or more generations. So you might have somebody who's 17 and you might have somebody who's 57. I don't know if any of you so far have been exposed to the fact that a lot of sectors now are struggling with candidates, and there are areas of procurement, I'm sure many of you are aware, where candidates are lying low and they're staying put. So we're now in the stage of, for many sectors, entering into a candidate-driven market. So there are more opportunities, either more opportunities than there are qualified candidates, or the candidates who are qualified, as I say, are just staying put, and therefore the inevitable skills shortages. For the past few years, and incredibly well highlighted over the past year through things like Black Lives Matter, Pride Month this month, and ongoing initiatives, an awful lot more focus on equality, diversity, inclusion. So what does that mean to this multi-generational piece? And Nicola, the speaker before me, talked about it as well: well-being, work-life balance, health and well-being at work. And I really genuinely think we've learned a lot about people in the last year, or the last 14 months rather, including ourselves. And I know that speaking with a few of the people who I know are on this conference this afternoon, people have said, Leslie, I'm surprised that the people I thought would have stepped up didn't, and the people that I really didn't think would step up have. And quite a lot of surprise around the fact that, we're all working from home now and we're all technical, and surely the younger generations will cope with that better. But for other reasons that aren't necessarily technology based, lots of young people haven't coped. we all need to find different ways of attracting, retaining and leading employees who have different expectations from other team members who we've maybe led in the past. And by 2028, it's thought that the average retirement age will be 67. So I'm delighted. I've got 11 years to go, so that's great. Can you wait? It can all seem a bit much when you're in a leadership role or in a senior management role, an executive role. You've got all these external pressures and external forces coming towards you, and all of a sudden there are policies and strategies flying around the place. And here's just an example of some of the ones that I know that have been coming into my inbox in the last few months, and I'm feeling a bit bamboozled. And all of those things, as I say, are almost trying to be shoehorned into what we're doing every day. And, you know, people are thinking we need to do more of inclusion. Yeah, but how does that fit with what we've got in psychological contract? How does psychological contract fit in with the protected characteristics? And what do we need to do more? And what about people who we want to encourage but aren't covered by protected characteristics? And what about our EVP? How are we going to get our EVP sorted? And is that part of organisational design, or is that part of organisational development? And then eventually your head falls off. So my answer is always to these things, let's keep it simple, let's keep it practical, and let's get back to basics. The way that I look at organisational life, anybody who's worked with me before will know that I am a simple soul with quite an adult brain. So simple is best. 4 fundamentals, and this is the world according to Leslie. What does your organisation do? Why does it do it, and who does it do it for? How does it work? And not only in structure, which is process and policy, but also in culture, so values and behaviours. How do we measure what we do? And again, we heard this from Nicola, the difference in the importance between output and outcomes. And maybe I'm looking at things too simplistically, but I think I would disagree a little bit with Nicola that I think outcomes are incredibly easily measured, because if they're not, then why are you doing them? But ultimately for this afternoon's presentation, it's about how does each employee add value? So how does everybody's personal contribution add to the overall delivery? And throughout thinking of that, we can do nothing else but think about, well, what do I expect from my people? And what do they expect from me? What do they expect from the organisation? Going back to the study that I mentioned earlier, the study from 2018, I've just picked out four of the highlights. Organisations perform well when leaders pay attention to both the organisation and individual expectations. So I am clear on what the organisation wants, and I am clear what individuals want. And as a leader, I'm the fulcrum in the middle, trying to meet both. Many organisations, in fact, I would go as far to say most organisations don't spend time reviewing the bigger picture and strategic picture, but not necessarily on one-to-one discussions. And I don't know how many times over the years leaders and managers have said to me, Leslie, I would never think about not going to a budget review meeting. I would never think about not going to a quarterly review meeting. I would never think about missing our management startup meeting on a Monday morning, but I will quite easily cancel or move somebody's one-to-one. And that's maybe just a wee bit food for thought for the people in the conference. We therefore spend more time, or inevitably spend more time, thinking about what the organisation wants, and we can often be less clear then on what individuals want, bearing in mind what our role as leaders is to make sure that people are performing. And even when we do that, we often assume that people want the same as us. And yes, different employees want different things. Of course they do. So when we think about difference, let's just have to think about these generational differences. Now, depending on which website you go to or which book you read, these numbers will be different, but these are the numbers that we choose to use. And I would be surprised if you had anyone in your teams or in your organisation who was more than 73. But I think that's a generation that's still worthwhile talking about because of the impact that that generation had on the world of work as we know it today. That's the generation who were born sort of late 40s, early 50s, and are thinking about, you know, they obviously didn't know the war, the Second World War, but their parents very much did. And the industry that we have now, that was then developed in the 50s and 60s, was very much developed by that generation. So their legacy is very much still with us. Then you have the baby boomers. Now, there's obviously no generation that's better than the rest. They're all equally good and bad, apart from baby boomers, who are obviously the best. Then we have Generation X. Generation X, work ethic, logical, resourceful. Quite a few similarities with baby boomers about commitment and that work ethic. Millennials, also known as Generation Y, known for their confidence. Some people would say known for a wee bit of cockiness, curiosity and challenging authority. I have an issue with that whole confidence thing. One of the things that I do in part of my day job is I run workshops for graduate interns and apprentices. And when you're working with people who are, you know, just, you know, out of university, mid 20s, yes, they do appear confident, but it doesn't take much scratching of the surface to realise that the confidence is bravado. And then you've got Generation Z, which are the generation that have recently started into the world of work. And then we have a new one coming on in the next couple of years, which will be Generation Alpha. And obviously the last year has had a huge impact on them. So when we talk about different generations, those are the type of things that I'm thinking about. So pulling out the main differences, the main differences are about role tenure and the social aspects of work. And I think these two things are linked to life in general, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. We have younger generations thinking that they will stay no more than 3 to 5 years. Older, in inverted commas, generations are going to stay longer in a role than that. And younger generations very much see work as part of their social world, whereas older generations tend not to. Again, another world according to Leslie. There was a study done by Glasgow Caledonian University a few years ago about Generation X. And it was saying that, sorry, Generation X and Generation Y, and it was saying that people born into those generations will know probably 4 or 5 different sets of parents because of mums and dads' divorces and partners and single mums, and then partners later on in their childhood. And the younger generations now are actually now knowing 4 or 5 different sets of grandparents. So that foundation that my older generation is perhaps more used to is different. It's not worse. It's just different. And I think that's why younger people do look for that social aspect at work, and maybe don't have the same commitment to one place, because, you know, why would I hang around for more than 8 years? Because nothing else seems to last for more than 8 years. So those are the main differences. But there are actually many more things that unite the different generations than divide them. People want to work for strong leaders. And in fact, the study that we did showed that one of the biggest gripes that people have at work is weak and ineffective leadership. People are looking for leaders to understand them and work with them. They're looking for people, and this is employees of all ages, remember, and they're looking for people to take time to speak with them and take time to understand them, not just to fire things through in an email. The younger generations in particular are looking for a focus on CSR, but everybody is looking for a focus on value and what the organisation actually stands for, what it's doing, what difference it's making to society. If it's a very commercial organisation, how is it giving back through charitable efforts? Everybody, and in particular over the last year, is concerned about their workload and that work-life balance. The flexibility of working, whether you call that hybrid working or not, but that ability to almost choose my core hours and then do whatever I want to do out with that because I have other priorities. Everybody's looking for career progression, and it's not always just about promotion. Sometimes it can just be about doing something different. And the big thing I think for us as leaders is that by far the majority of people are looking for some form of flexible benefits that suits me now, and that then I can change in 5 or 6 or 10 years, or indeed tomorrow, should my circumstances change. So the multi-generation thing that Stephen introduced, that I talked about, is an absolute myth? Well, the answer, of course, is obviously yes and no. Grouping or clustering, as it's called in the world of statistics, as most of you will know, is helpful, but it has its limitations. And I think there's a really good practical thing in here. You know, we talked earlier about all those different initiatives that come and bombard us, and I think there's a really practical thing in here about, if as leaders, if we can really work hard to understand everyone in our team, what their drivers are, what their motivators are, what their expectations are, then we will get more from them and they will get more from us. And that is then a cycle, a positive cycle. Simon Sinek, I'm a huge Simon Sinek fan. I'm sure many of you have seen his podcast and read some of his stuff. And this is a particular favourite about, you know, leadership is not about being in charge. Leadership is about caring for those in your charge. And for the purposes of this exercise, I actually had a bit of a brain dump the other day and thinking, well, you know, if I even think about the people who I manage and have managed recently, who have they been? Who has actually been in my charge? And this is the list I came up with. So I have led people who are carers, people who have changing priorities, people who have gone through menopause, people who are single parents, people who are starting out, people who are going through divorce, you know, etc., etc., etc. And I think when we look at this list, we can all think about the people in our team who have this, and it's not necessarily just one or the other, you know, who have these pressures on them. So everyone is different. And of course, all these things can happen to you at various times in our lives. If we go back to basics, as I promised we would do, I think that a leader's job is all about, what do you do? So how do you attract, retain and inspire talent? And then what you get back is that performance. Looking at all those things again, there is a solution to this. I promised you a solution and you're going to get one. At the moment, we have obviously at the top of the organisation strategy and policy. You then have corporate initiatives, and those are all the bubbles that were on the previous slide. And the corporate initiatives are trying to, you know, force themselves in or shoehorn themselves into our daily working life, and then sometimes can feel as if they're sort of squishing down performance. And then you've got individual expectations, and then he's trying to push up performance. And I genuinely believe that whereas leaders we need to start is here. And I think spending more time, if you don't do it just now, really understanding the expectations that your team members, not your team, not the collective, but your team members have from work and what they need from us to do their absolute best needs to be a starting point. You then have corporate initiatives, because they're never ever going away, and actually they are incredibly helpful, but they then become the enablers for what people want to do rather than what people want to do. And the individual expectations, and I think this is something that we're going to be hearing a lot of in the next few months and year, hopefully, is about individual purpose, if it hasn't come to you already. We're actually doing a piece of work over the summer round about people's identity and why people's identity is very closely linked to their work. You know, you go to a party and what's the first question? Well, what do you do? And unfortunately, it can be a female thing about, you know, well, I'm just a housewife. Well, there's no such thing as just an anything. And I've got friends who are retired who will say, oh, I'm a retired GP, or I'm a retired. Well, why don't you just say I'm retired? What's the need to put that identity of your occupation beside it? And it's obviously something innate in us driving that. So that's a piece of research, and I'm sure a few people on this conference are actually going to be involved in that research, so we'll keep you posted on that. So just to pull out that thing about purpose a little bit more, having the conversations with individuals, and yes, of course, performance reviews are important, and reviewing objectives and whatever it is you do as part of your PDPs or performance review process. But just really thinking and digging a little bit deeper into those individuals and thinking, why do you do this? Why do you do what would you do? What's important to you now? How can I help you live the life that you want to live? Because I know by doing that, you will actually be more productive, and I will get higher performance, which is motivational for all and better for everybody. In this role, how do we maximize your talent? Is a really big question, and sometimes we miss it. And I'm just trying to think who it was. It was Jane Jones from Argyll earlier was saying, you know, the beginning of COVID last year, putting a project team together and realizing that so-and-so can do this because he used to work for Sainsbury's, and so-and-so can do that. They did that in a previous life. And, you know, we are surrounded by people with a whole load of talent that we don't always tap into, and I think that's a bit of a sin. Summary? Absolutely, knowing about the different generations is useful, but it's limiting. We've had an incredible 14 months, I'll use the word incredible, highlighting what people want from work, what their purpose is and how that matches, and people in themselves. I've had a few people come to me in my other hat as being an executive recruiter and saying, Leslie, I know I'm on a 6-figure salary, and I know I could make an awful lot more money, but actually the last year has taught me that I don't want to do this anymore. I want to work for a public sector, or I want to work for a third sector organisation. So people's attitudes to work have changed. Common themes between generations are more than what divides them, and something from a McKinsey report that just came out a couple of weeks ago. Employees are looking for companies to meet them where they are. And when you have conversations about purpose or about individual expectations, you're then able to tick off many of those things that were in the bubbles that we talked about earlier. And ultimately, the words of wisdom from Leslie this afternoon: if you don't lead your talent, remember we said it's a candidate-driven market in many areas, and people will have choices. And if you don't lead your talent, then I'm afraid somebody else might. And that's me.
Leslie, thank you for that. It was really interesting. And guys, any questions for, I've got an echo, so I'll hold off. Any questions for Leslie? I guess the usual manner, if you put your hands up or put anything in the chat box. And I guess, Leslie, while I'm waiting, you know, you've talked about the different generations, you've talked about managing existing workforce. Is there a silver bullet that you think makes people who work for you or people who don't sit up and think this is the organisation for me? Is there anything you've seen that really makes people take attention?
I think going back to what I was saying, Stephen, I think what makes people pay attention is actually feeling part of something because they're listened to. So, you know, I work for a leader who understands me, and that's not necessarily a new thing. I think the big difference is that maybe previous generations, and I would perhaps put my baby boomer generation in this, is that we kind of put up with it, whereas perhaps younger generations won't put up with it. And I'd be really interested. There must be hundreds of people on this call who are younger than me, so I'd be interested to hear what they think. Whereas some of us have been, because of our world of work was moulded by that post-war generation, we were kind of told to, you know, just sit up and thole it. Whereas I think the younger generation are saying, no, I really want to be understood. I think that could, if there was a silver bullet, it's that leader actually paying attention to me as an individual and realizing I have a life, not just a job.
Okay, thank you. Leslie, I don't see any other hands up unless you guys can see them. Don't see any questions. Lots of comments, lots of discussion going on the side, Leslie. So, and we'll share that with you later on. And Leslie, if there's any more questions, what we'll do is we'll forward them onto you and we'll add them. So all the sessions, folks, and the slides will be made available in the Academy later on. So Leslie, let me finish by saying thank you. You know, it was really interesting, a lot of food for thought. And for anybody who was in the previous session as well, if we think of that quantum change in technology and the future, and then thinking about the people and the multi-generational, we've got a lot to do. But
yes.
I'm pretty positive about the future and, you know, what it means for us. And there's comments coming in left, right and centre here for you, Leslie, about people enjoying us. So great. So folks, Leslie, thank you. Everyone else, thank you for attending. That's the end of today's stream. So Leslie and everyone else, I'd like to say thank you for spending the day with us and hope you have a good evening. Thank you.
Bye-bye all. Thanks, Stephen. Bye.